They told you something your whole life. Being alone is failure. Being alone is weakness. Being alone means something is wrong with you. But what if that was the lie? What if the silence you fear is actually the place where power begins? Most people never meet themselves. They meet noise, opinion, expectations, crowds. But the moment you are truly alone, the noise disappears, and something else begins to speak. Society trains you to fear separation. Stay connected, stay visible, stay approved, because the crowd survives on agreement. But the individual, the one who can stand alone, cannot be easily controlled. Niccolo Machiavelli watched power carefully. Kings, generals, merchants, rulers surrounded by allies. But he noticed something strange. The men who held power the longest were the ones who were not afraid to stand completely alone. Loneliness is not always a wound. Sometimes it is a forge, a place where illusions burn, where borrowed identities collapse, where the person you were pretending to be finally dies. So, before we go further, ask yourself one question. Are you building a prison or a laboratory? Because the weak man isolates himself to hide, but the dangerous man uses solitude to understand the world. Robert Greene once wrote something strange. Do not build fortresses. Isolation is dangerous. At first, this sounds like a contradiction, but look closer. He was not warning you about solitude. He was warning you about fear. There are two kinds of isolation. The first is the fortress of fear, a prison built by someone who is terrified of the world. He hides. He surrounds himself with approval. He blocks every voice that might challenge him. History is full of men like this. Kings hiding behind walls. Leaders surrounded by flatterers. People who cut themselves off from reality. And when the storm arrives, their fortress becomes their coffin. But there is another kind of solitude, the dangerous kind. Marcus Aurelius wrote his thoughts in a war tent, surrounded by death, surrounded by chaos. Yet his mind remained clear. And Machiavelli, when he lost everything, his position, his power, his city, he did not beg. He did not chase approval. He wrote. So here is the question. Are you hiding from the world or studying it from distance? Two kinds of solitude. One weak, one powerful. If you understand the difference, type one word in the comments. Awake. Think about the stories you were told as a child. The lone wolf is dangerous. The sheep that leaves the flock dies. The hero always travels with friends. The message was always the same. Stay with the group. Never walk alone. But this conditioning was not accidental. Societies run on compliance. Economies run on consumption. Both require the same thing. Your attention, your insecurity, your need for approval. If you are comfortable alone, something dangerous happens. You stop performing. You stop chasing approval. You stop buying things to impress people who do not care about you. Arthur Schopenhauer understood this. He wrote something brutal. The person who enjoys solitude possesses something rare, a self that is sufficient unto itself. A self-sufficient mind is a threat to the system, because a man who does not need the crowd cannot be easily manipulated. He cannot be easily sold to. He cannot be easily controlled. So society does something clever. It pathologizes solitude. They call it anxiety, attachment issues, avoidance. But sometimes, loneliness is not illness. Sometimes it is independence. There is something the crowd never tells you. Original thought is almost impossible inside a crowd, because the group does not think. It echoes. Friedrich Nietzsche understood this. He climbed into the Swiss Alps alone. Hours of silence, hours of walking, and inside that silence, his mind ignited. When you spend real time alone, something strange begins to happen. Your thoughts change. They stop sounding like everyone else's voice. And slowly, you hear something different. Your own. Isaac Newton invented calculus while isolated during a plague. No meetings, no conferences, no social noise, just silence and a thinking mind. Charles Darwin spent decades in quiet isolation on his estate, thinking, observing, writing, and the theory of evolution was born. The crowd consumes, the crowd repeats, the crowd reacts. But creation is solitary. If you are alone right now, you are standing in front of an empty canvas. The question is simple. Will you create or will you wait for an audience? There is another truth most people never realize. The man who fears being alone is the easiest man to control. Because the moment you need people more than they need you, power disappears. Machiavelli observed something about princes who failed. They needed too many allies, too many approvals, too many hands holding their fate. And when people sense you depend on them, they begin to test you. They push boundaries. They show less respect. They treat you like an option, because they know you cannot walk away. And the person who cannot walk away has already lost. But everything changes the moment you become comfortable with solitude. When you can walk away without fear, something powerful happens. You stop negotiating from hunger. You relate from wholeness, not from emptiness, not from desperation. And paradoxically, this makes people want you more. Self-sufficiency is gravity. Remember this. Neediness repels. Independence attracts. The man who can stand alone does not chase loyalty. He inspires it. And that is where real power begins. When most people start losing ground, they panic. They push harder. They explain more. They chase respect. But this only accelerates their defeat. The amateur doubles down. The strategist does something unexpected. He withdraws. Not with drama, not with anger, not with explanation. He simply disappears. This is called the strategic retreat. You become less available, less visible, less predictable, and suddenly the balance shifts. The energy you were wasting trying to prove yourself returns to you. Your attention comes back home. And for the first time in a long time, you can think clearly. Distance does something proximity never can. It reveals truth. When you step away, you begin to see people exactly as they are. Most people are terrified of stepping back. But distance is where clarity lives. If this perspective changed how you see power, let this idea travel. Pass it forward. Someone else may need to hear it. Arthur Schopenhauer said something most people do not want to hear. A person's value is revealed by how much they enjoy their own company. Most people cannot sit in silence. They scroll. They talk. They distract themselves with endless noise. Because silence forces a dangerous encounter. The encounter with themselves. Inside every person there are things they do not want to see. Fear, shame, unfinished wounds, desires they were taught to hide. This is why most people run back to the crowd. The crowd is anesthesia. It numbs the mind. It protects them from seeing the truth about themselves. But the person who can sit in that silence and survive it gains something rare. A self that does not collapse when the world goes quiet. This is called psychological independence. An identity that does not require witnesses. A mind that can stand even in total silence. There is something else the crowd rarely admits. They fear the person who walks alone. Not because you threaten them, but because you reveal something they cannot face. Your solitude is an accusation. Every moment you are content alone is a silent question to everyone around you. What if they never needed the crowd either? This is why they label you strange, difficult, too intense, not social enough. But these labels are not diagnosis. They are defense. Nietzsche warned us about the herd. The herd enforces conformity, not with laws, but with pressure. A raised eyebrow, a whisper, a slow exclusion. But the herd only controls you if you still want their approval. The moment you release that need, their weapons vanish. Their judgment was never power. It was noise. And the moment you stop listening, you discover something rare. Freedom from the herd. Now we arrive at the real transformation. The alchemy of solitude. Most people experience loneliness as suffering, but the rare few learn to turn it into power. The first stage is acknowledgement. Stop treating solitude like a disease. Stop seeing it as a failure. Your isolation is raw material. The second stage is excavation. When the noise disappears, you begin to find things inside yourself. Old fears, hidden anger, unfinished pain. This is where most people run. Back to distraction, back to the crowd, because the truth inside silence is uncomfortable. But power lives there. The third stage is integration. You stop pretending to be only light. You accept the darker parts of yourself, and suddenly they stop controlling you. And the final stage is construction. From the fire and the darkness you build something rare. A sovereign mind. A self that belongs to no one but you. Once you master solitude, you begin to see something most people miss. How many lives are quietly controlled? Not by chains, but by expectations, family expectations, social status, reputation, approval, invisible strings that guide behavior more effectively than force ever could. The man who cannot sit alone must obey these strings, because his identity lives inside other people's minds. And that makes him easy to control. But the man who has built his identity in solitude becomes difficult to manipulate, because his center is internal. You can threaten him, judge him, exclude him, but none of it works, because the leverage is gone. The strings no longer attach, and this is the quiet paradox. The man who does not need the stage often becomes the most powerful presence on it. At this point, something subtle changes. Solitude stops feeling like exile and begins to feel like territory. Your mind becomes quieter, clearer. The endless noise of comparison starts fading. And suddenly, you notice something. You are thinking for yourself. Most people search for power in external places. Money, status, recognition. But the rarest power is internal sovereignty. A mind that is not owned by the crowd. A sense of self that does not depend on applause, or approval, or permission. When the world becomes chaotic, most people collapse, because their identity was built on unstable ground. But the sovereign mind remains still. And this is the final realization. You were never separated from the world. You were simply learning how to stand inside it. If you have watched this far, then something inside you already understands. Solitude was never the punishment. It was the training. The silence taught you to hear your mind. The darkness forced you to face yourself. The distance revealed who people really are. And slowly, without noticing, you built something most people never do. A mind that does not collapse in silence. A self that stands alone. Ironically, this is the moment people begin to notice you. Not because you tried to impress them, but because you stopped trying. The crowd spends its life searching for approval, but the sovereign individual moves differently. He walks alone not because he must, but because he can. If these ideas resonated with you, this is only one lesson in a much deeper journey. Stay close. Subscribe. Turn on the bell. There are many more psychological truths waiting ahead.